Hello and welcome to Friday night at the Big Cat Cafe. I'm Elizabeth Ellen Carter.
And I'm Duncan Carling Rogers.
We're going to be talking about time travel today.
We're going to be talking about time travel today.
I thought I already said that.
I thought you already said that.
Hang on, we've got a temporal paradox happening.
Whoa, there you go. Now, actually, the temporal paradox would probably happen if we went back in time and accidentally killed one of our parents.
That is a trope that is very common in time travel. I like the quote from Isaac Asimov, though. Time travel is theoretically impossible, but I wouldn't want to give it up as a plot gimmick. And the reason why I wanted to talk about time travel this week is the incredible series that everybody is going mad about called Outlander, which is based on the series of novels by Diana Gabaldon. It's set in 1940s Scotland and in ancient Scotland.
It's funny that the TV series is called Outlander because, and it's set in Scotland, because it makes me think of Highlander, which was another time travel movie to a certain extent, wasn't it?
Well, it was. The Highlanders were immortal. But I mean, time travel is an absolutely fascinating aspect of literature. One of my absolute favourites is The Time Machine by H.G. Wells.
Yeah, an oldie and Goldie, quite a good novel. Selected for to be made into a movie on a number of occasions. Most recently with
Guy Pearce.
Guy Pearce, yes.
Yes.
Who put in a fairly creditable performance, but for my money, I don't think you can go past Rod Taylor.
Rod Taylor.
In the somewhat awkward earlier adaptation, I believe, from the 1960s.
Both Australians.
There you go. That's an interesting point about it, though, isn't it?
And of course, Highlander was directed by an Australian, Russell Mulcahy.
Excellent. Yes, indeed. Mulcahy did a lot of work around that time. He also did a movie about feral pigs.
Which had nothing to do with time travel at all.
No, it was something of an outback horror movie, if I remember rightly. Can't remember the title.
Well, The French Lieutenant's Woman?
Yes, of course, time travel in there, in that it takes the characters back and forth between the period in which the book is written and the period in history in which it's set. What other time travel movies do you have on your list?
Oh, well, The Time Traveller's Wife. That's number one on the Goodreads list of best time travel films. And of course, that is a very interesting one because the author of that, Audrey Niffenegger, wrote it basically as a cathartic piece after a series of failed relationships.
Tell us what The Time Traveller's Wife is about.
A love story about a man with a genetic disorder that causes him to time travel unpredictably.
Okay.
I don't understand how the genetic disorder causes him to travel unpredictably through time. And his wife is an artist who has to cope with his frequent absences and dangerous experiences. And of course, that was turned into a lovely, lovely film, which starred Eric Bana, another Australian.
There you go, time travel. It must be an Australian thing.
I think so. Although I would suggest that Slaughterhouse-5 is a different order of magnitude.
Yeah, well, it's Kurt Vonnegut, and that makes it a different order of magnitude altogether. Vonnegut is a writer who, or was a writer who was a very acquired taste, very interesting work in the sci-fi vein, elements of fantasy in there as well. And Vonnegut wasn't averse to occasionally doing little sketches that he'd put in his books as well. So what's that make it? Multimedia?
Before such a word existed.
Yeah.
So Do you like time travel books?
I've not read a lot of sci-fi for many years. I was very much into it when I was in my 20s and younger, but not so much anymore. I found it interesting the way in which you mentioned that the Highlanders in the movie Highlander travelled through time by dint of the fact that they were immortals and didn't die. So they travelled through time by being immortal, I guess. And that is a definition that I've seen somewhere before. That we're all time travellers. We sit here in the present, and the past flows out behind us, and we travel into the future.
Oh, that's very deep. I like that one. I
Well,
like that one a lot.
there you go. I don't know whether I heard it somewhere else or whether I made it up myself, but go
Take-
ahead.
Take credit. Take
I'll,
credit.
Well, I'll take credit for it, and everybody out there, start writing novels based on that.
I enjoy time travel as a sci-fi trope, and it's just me personally, in terms of reading a romance, I really have difficulty getting into a time travel historical romance, because the heroine usually has travelled back into the past to find her hero, tends to break the fourth wall. I can't make the separation between a contemporary modern woman who is transplanted in a time which is different. It's like being transplanted into a new planet or a new country.
Are you saying that essentially you couldn't do it? That you don't believe that people who are unprepared for time travel could actually cope with the reality of it?
No, I don't think they could. And I mean, I know there are some fantastic romances out there that have a time travel trope to it, and great stories. But it's something that I have a little difficulty with. It's one of the reasons why I wouldn't mind checking out the Outlander books, because the heroine is not a 21st century heroine. She's a World War II era nurse.
I'm also reminded here of the TV series, was it Goodnight Sweetheart?
Oh, yes. Yes,
which
indeed.
was a similar sort of trope, but going back to Outlander, would it necessarily be easier for a person from the 1940s to be able to cope with time travel?
No, and my objections are minor, and they're merely in my head. But it does remind me of a sci-fi story that you were telling me about a modern Air Force pilot who ends up going back in time to the First World War.
Ah, right, yeah. Yes, that's actually a short story called Hawk Among the Pigeons, which I had a copy of many years ago, no longer do. But it was about an Air Force pilot who's on a mission in his jet, and all of a sudden he flies out of some clouds, and he's just whizzed past a bunch of biplanes, and it's World War One. And it's how he copes with going back in time. He doesn't have to pretend that he's not from the future, though.
I'd have thought the jet would make it obvious.
Yeah, one of the rather neat things about that particular short story was that they have to spend an inordinate amount of time straining and refining World War One era fuel just to be able to get his jet up in the air for like 15 minutes. And in the end, one of the things that they do is they also punch holes in the wings of his plane so that they can fit machine guns.
Oh, yes.
You know, so
Things like
there
that.
you go.
Well-
Part of the danger in that, of course, is that you may create that time travel paradox. There he is going to war for the Allies during World War One. If he changed the outcome, the historical outcome of a battle. It could seriously damage stuff. Pretty much the same way as there's a science fiction story by, it may be Robert Heinlein, I'm not exactly sure here, in which people go back in time to go big game hunting, but they're going big game hunting, shooting prehistoric monsters such as Tyrannosaurus Rex and Brontosaurus, and they go on these hovering walkways so that they don't damage anything. And then at one point some guy who's gone back goes crazy and runs off into the jungle, and they chase off after him and go back, and when they get back to the present day, it's a totalitarian state, everything's changed, and suddenly one of them notices that there's a crushed butterfly on the boot of one of the men who chased after him.
Well, look, we can't talk about time travel in fiction and stories without addressing the granddaddy of them all. That's right, Doctor Who.
What do you think of the new Doctor?
I like the new Doctor. I love his sour, grumpy Scottishness, and I haven't seen a lot of the early Doctor Who's, but I would imagine that he's a bit like Hartnell.
Yeah, William Hartnell. I did see a lot of the early Doctor Who. As a small child, I hid behind the sofa. I was so afraid and terrified by the initial appearances of the Daleks. One thing that was really good about the original Doctor Who was the fact that the show was conceived as a history lesson, essentially. And a great many of the early Doctor Who episodes and adventures were just historicals. They were just the Doctor and whoever happened to be his companions of the time going back in time and encountering the War of the Roses and Stone Age Man and that sort of thing. And the show was essentially conceived by the BBC as a way of keeping kids interested in learning history. What is it about time travel that's such an interesting romance novel trope?
Well, I think it puts the heroine, or puts the reader rather, in the shoes of the heroine, because your 21st century or your 20th century heroine who goes back in time is a very modern woman who goes through the same ups and downs of life that the reader most likely themselves have been through. Join us for a red wine and a great chat Friday nights at the Big Cat Cafe.
Good night.
Good night.